Hedi's things are very simple, but with great detail, and they're very classic. So it means you can wear them from season to season. And I think that's very important. He doesn't change too quickly, but he's probably the most inventive men's designer in the world.
Do you find that working in, because fashion is as much as what you're doing as a project, it also is a business. Do you find you've had to absorb certain commercial realities in your work?
Absolutely, yeah. Right, the first day. And
you don't feel you've had to compromise at all in any way?
No. I would have gone. No. That's why I left Saint Laurent somehow. So I'm not really much into compromise.
Without any kind of leadership from you, without you leading them, without you saying this is what I'm doing, so everybody goes, oh.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Hello. Welcome back to my huge channel. Today I want to talk with you about a pretty controversial topic that has been discussed about a lot. I'm talking about the newest creative director of the French house, Celine, who's also the artistic director and the image director and everything at all. I think it's pretty interesting to have a look at Hedi Slimane from a different perspective, because I think and have the feeling, as a huge old Celine fan also, that we're pretty blindsided when it comes to him as the newest director. So let's start. The first thing I do whenever I start with my research concerning designers or brands is always to start from the beginning on. So when was the designer born? Where was his childhood? What was he influenced by? And this usually, for 80%, gives me so many answers for the questions that I had before. And I also experienced the same with Hedi Slimane. I already knew a little bit about him, but later on, the more I read about him, everything made kind of sense. And at the end of the video, you will just be like, oh my god, okay, that explains why we see the Celine. And maybe it will also change your mind and also what you think about the clothes. And I also hope that you like my previous videos where I also talk about designers, shopping advice, etc. So do not forget to subscribe or follow me on Instagram if you like this stuff that I create. So this is awkward, let's start. Hedi Slimane, if we pronounce it like the French people, who do not see the letter H as a respectful letter, so they don't pronounce it at the beginning anyway. It's Hedi Slimane, or I think if we even think about his Arabic background, because his father is Tunisian, the mother is Italian, but the surname definitely comes from the father, which is Slimane, and I know a lot of Arabic people who pronounce it Slimani, so whatever, I will just call him Hedi Slimane from now on. He was born in 1968 in the 19th arrondissement of Paris, which is a pretty nice spot if you know Paris. So with 11 years already, which is pretty early, he started to get a little bit more interested in photography and black and white photography especially. He already received his very first camera, which also is kind of the first step into the creative world for him, because he starts to photograph, and especially black and white photography, and he loves to print them also himself. So if you think about the 11 years old kids that we see right now, I do not know how many are interested in black and white photography. Not too many, unfortunately, I guess. So this is pretty interesting that it roots very early in his childhood the interest for photography and artistry. Later on he studied art history at the École du Louvre, so again it wasn't very practical fashion design like we used to see at many other designers. He just studied art history and did something ongoing like learning tailoring skills also at a men's design house. So from 1992 to 1995, where Hedi was 24 years old, he assisted a fashion consultant who's called Jean-Jacques Picard, and he helped him with the centenary of the project monogram canvas of Louis Vuitton. What is pretty striking here is that there were a lot of artists there to celebrate the whole monogram Louis Vuitton history, and also created some new monograms themselves, and people there were like Azedine Alaya, Vivienne Westwood, Karl Lagerfeld, so a huge amount of geniuses together. And he of course only assisted the consultant, but it was again like the first step into the fashion industry for him. So just a year afterwards, I do not know if it really had an influence on him getting the job kind of. So in 1996 Hedi Slimane was called artistic director of Yves Saint Laurent, and we all know the very striking silhouette Hedi Slimane is favored for, which is being skinny, leather jackets, tight blazers, and ties especially. So it was again this very rock and roll image that he created, and he definitely left a mark there. But in 2000, even though he could have stayed there, you know, his contract was going to be elongated actually, he didn't want to stay there, and he even got an offer from Jill Zander in 2000, which is like extremely funny, isn't it? You know, imagine Hedi Slimane and Jill Zander. I mean, 2000 was a different era, Jill was still there, but anyway, it's pretty funny to me. But Hedi Slimane just got another huge opportunity, and that was the reason why he also skipped offers like Jill Zander. It was Dior Homme, and that was like his big era, and he definitely earned this era because he changed everything Dior Homme was. Of course, Dior Homme was still very tailoring oriented and still very sophisticated and one of the biggest menswear brands on the runway, but he was able to change the silhouette so extremely, to fresh up the brand extremely. And if you want to have a professional look and what really changed at Dior Homme's, it's like, if you look at the profit Dior gained in 2002, it just increased by 41%, you know. So ready-to-wear, couture, accessories, I mean, I think they had fragrance as well. So everything was going very well, even though he was just there for a single year. And again, if we look at the silhouettes, it changed, and I mean, we're still in 2002 now. If we look in retrospect, for example, and if I look at the Dior Homme pieces Hedi created in 2002, it's insane. And as I said in any other video, I can't recall, but Carl was the biggest fan of him, and he said to me he changed it, and he creates the only suits I want to wear. And I think even Brad Pitt was wearing a Dior Homme suit of Hedi Slimane when he had his marriage with Jennifer Aniston. So pretty cool. So these were like the first years where he really marked his place and made his name extremely famous, and earned this definitely for his designs. But in my opinion, what is very striking about Hedi Slimane as a designer is that the only thing he cares about is not design. And this is something very special because he loves music, and it's not just any kind of music. I mean, if you look at the designs, you kind of have a clue of what kind of music he has. You know, and we see that if you look at the people he also dressed personally. There were the Libertines. I mean, he has just a single art book where, yeah, he's talking about this London lifestyle and fashion style, which is with Pete Doherty. He dressed Franz Ferdinand, which is like the epitome of Hedi Slimane in my opinion. He dressed Jack White, Mick Jagger, Daft Punk, you know. These are all bands that I think where we see a lot of inspiration Hedi is usually getting. And in some interviews he also says that the music is a fundamental part of his runway shows and of him designing the clothes, the pieces in general. He says if he hasn't got the perfect music to his runway, it doesn't work. And it speaks a totally different language, and it shows something completely different. And if we think of that, and if we look at the last collections he did for Celine, for example, I think the last one was very striking. And I personally loved it, and while watching it, my first thoughts were like, okay, this is not a typical runway music intro, you know. This is not like a bit deep house music that fits to the steps of the models, you know. I think Prada did it very well in the last collection. The moment I read this interview of him, I extremely felt aligned, you know. I was like, yes, the music is very important, and to me personal music is also very important. I mean, to everyone is, but he made it to his profession. He had some books, you know, about photography in itself. And again, if we think that again of that 11-year-old boy who started with photography and black and white photography, who started to print them himself, I mean, I think we see that everything kind of makes sense here. So in general, he says that yes, the clothes are important, and of course the tailoring and everything technical about them, but it's also, you know, the whole vibe, the whole packaging of a collection is important. What do I try to tell? What is my testimony? What is my statement I want to make with a certain collection? In another interview, he also says that he sees himself as a designer also in the position to create opportunities for smaller musicians, for example. So it's not only about fashion. I mean, he usually talks like about 50% at least about the music he uses. So I think that is something very striking, and because usually they talk a lot about the messages and the statements they have with their designs or their cuts or the fabrics they use, their garments, etc. But I didn't find anything where he's like talking really on spot about the fabrics he's using, and that it has to be Italian merino wool, and that he usually is talking about the message he wants to give. And this is something very striking, and that helped me to see his whole runway from a different perspective. You know, when I looked at the Celine collections of Phoebe Philo, I wasn't really thinking of the message, because I think the message was, I am a strong woman and I know how to dress, because it looked extremely cool and good and I loved everything. And it was always like the feeling I have now with the Mayas at Jill Zander. It's like I get this garment and I'm looking at, oh my god, this is tailored insanely. By the way, I just got 2 new Jill Zander pieces which are insane. You know, I can make a single video just about one of them. This is a different kind of design. You know, the Jill Zander and I don't know, the Celines of this world are thinking differently and are concentrating on different things, which is at the end of the day more important to me personally. But here, I mean, he never uses famous artists, and he also says he wants to give them a platform, and many of them also were very successful afterwards. I mean, what options do you have when you try to fill the footsteps of a person like Phoebe Philo? I mean, it's impossible. And I think LVMH did the right decision with taking somebody on board who is completely different, you know, and everybody knew that you couldn't fill these footsteps, and this huge old Celine fan base would have been gone, and now they're all at Bottega. Another problem of Celine obviously was that they had a very loyal fan base, but they were pretty old. And this is a very generic problem of many luxury houses that they want to change. And usually I feel like the result of wanting to change your target group and you want to, you know, speak to more Gen Z or millennial people is just to put more logos on stuff. You know, I mean, I just realized when I looked at the last Off-White collection, for example, that I felt like, wow, this is more appealing to me. Why is it like that? Oh, I don't see any logos. Oh, I'm old. You know, I think some designers start with a very concentrated target group on young people because they are the richest ones we have right now, and there have never been any richer young people than we have now. So either they try to catch them with that and then they try to get sophisticated later on, or you have this very sophisticated and good brand like Celine, but you realize that they're not people coming after, you know. And now that Phoebe Philo also have left, you know, the older people, we're all gonna die, and then there's nobody to buy Celine, so let's put some logos on it, or just change it a little. I mean, if we look at the fashion at Celine now, I really cannot say anything about it, and that actually means I don't want to, because I really try to have a objective view on the fashion in itself, but I really couldn't help but just find very fast fashion oriented and very Instagram oriented inspiration. So what I want to see is his music inspiration that he has, you know, this very 90s, 2000s inspiration from the music world, from the art world, that speaks like a bit more of a leisure fashion. And this whole discussion, for example, with the skinniness, not his own skinniness, but the skinniness that he kind of requires on his models, because I haven't seen any plus size person, and I'm not even talking about plus size, you know, like a size 6 or something. I have this feeling like if you only show very skinny people, you know, usually skinny people do not have very feminine or masculine attributes about them because they're very skinny, and that makes them very childish. But I also think that he wants to have this youthfulness kind of shown in his designs. So coming back to his fashion career actually, well, in 2007 Slimane did not renew his contract actually with Dior, which he could have done if he wanted to. He was thinking to create his own namesake label, but the discussions kind of failed. Probably he was talking to some big houses or investors, but he never really did that, which is also a good thing. I think if you're a good designer for big design houses, just stay like that, because it's never possible to create a great personal collection and a great one for your employer. He already had his books, which came out from the German-based publisher Steidl, who's very famous for big photo books, and he already had some prizes and publications. Again, Karl Lagerfeld was a big fan of his photography, but in 2007, when he didn't continue with his contract at Dior Homme, he decided to move to LA. Which is pretty interesting in my opinion, because I would never have thought that Hedi Slimane would leave Paris or Milan or London or Berlin, because he's very European, I would say. So, and now it's been a few years since, how was it called? Hedi Slimane is in LA, and he got another offer after John Galliano decided to leave Dior in 2011 to be the new creative director of Dior, which is again like a super huge opportunity, but he skips it again. He doesn't want to do it, and a year later he comes to Yves Saint Laurent after Stefano Pilati is leaving. And this is maybe the time of Hedi Slimane we all kind of recall the best, because it's not been that long ago. You know, if I think of Hedi Slimane, I usually have to think of Yves Saint Laurent and not Dior. But it's very important to know actually that Dior are his first big footsteps that created this whole image around him, that he also just implemented on Yves Saint Laurent actually. And now, yeah, well, as we know, for the last 2 to 3 years, when was it? I think 2018, he's at Celine, and I think, well, my personal perspective is still that his Celine collections are the least strongest ones he ever created, the ones he thinks the least about, in my opinion. And I think the reason for this is just simply like the experience he had with the last 2 big houses he worked for. I mean, he actually just worked for Dior and Yves Saint Laurent, and now at Celine I think he tried to implement the same on Celine. It doesn't work at all, in my opinion. I just feel that people are very devastated, and I think we can here really differentiate between just being like a sick old Celine fan who hates everything and everyone that will come now, and people who would just like to see proper design, kind of. Thinking about his life is definitely not an excuse for what we see now, but I mean, just with the latest video, for example, of the collection that we saw, we definitely see here that he's a visual artist. He's not a classical designer. He's actually an artistic director, I would say. He sees a collection from a different perspective, and not only from a design perspective anymore, because I think he used to do that when he came to Dior Homme, definitely. I most certainly think that he just got this big to-do of changing the target group and changing the kind of image Celine had, and what he can do best is changing images for Dior, for Yves Saint Laurent. And what he definitely can do best is turning brands from being norm core or having a certain core that you want to change into a very edgy, uneasy but also exciting new brand. But I think this whole thing about his background and his design experience helps definitely a lot to understand why is he designing like that. So yeah, that's it. So I hope you liked this video, and even though this was not a very classical analysis where I look about every single look, which is definitely not necessary here because there's not a lot to talk about, I still hope that this helped you kind of to understand why we see the Celine creations we have to see now, and this helped me definitely a lot. So I hope you liked it, and do not forget to subscribe if you like this, and watch my other videos, and I'm going to eat and drink my chai. See you on my other videos.
Or to graphism, or to any sort of creative fields. So we sort of tried to do, and we did some projects during those 5 seasons that we were really happy of, and then some that I didn't achieve, I suppose, and it's still in process.